Hey, it's a Humble Collector here. In today's video, we're going to take a look at another photograph of my collection, this time a knocked out KV-1. So, we can tell this is a KV-1 due to the turret shape. KV-2s have the much larger turret. And I have a lot of photos of KV tanks in my collection. They're some of my favorites, actually. Probably my favorite tank class of the Second World War. Yeah, they're not the best tanks. They're not the prettiest tanks. I just think they're neat. I really like the way that they look. I kind of like the threat that they pose the early part of Barbarossa. So, I have probably like 24 photos of KV tanks in my collection. But this is one I kind of want to talk about because it's interesting. There's kind of an interesting story going on here. So obviously, one of the first things that your eye gets drawn to is the battle damage. We can see this tank has taken some kind of explosive hit to the front right of its track there. You can see how the armor plate's all peeled up. And from the way that the track is draped over the driving gear, I don't think this tank was moving when it took this hit, because generally if the tank was moving at any speed and it got a D-track hit like this, the track would be like flat on the ground, the tank would be, further ahead. So the way it's draped here leads me to believe the tank was stationary when it took this hit. Now, that's not necessarily surprising, for reasons we'll get into later, because I think this tank actually had been broken down before it took this hit. Even if it hadn't and it had been involved in combat when it took this strike, I've heard that the KV tanks were not the best at firing on the move for various reasons. Like the KV-2 in particular, I guess the turret was so heavy that if they tried to fire it on anything other than level ground, it would actually like knock itself out of the turret ring, and then it would be jammed basically. I don't think the KV-1 had quite that extreme of a problem, but still something to consider. Now, as I said though, I think this tank was broken down because right away, looking at the damage here, your eyes are automatically drawn up to this open hatch on top of the turret, and there's just a toolbox sitting there. And from there, as you move back onto the engine deck, you can actually see that the engine maintenance hatches are open. There's various tools lying around. I think this one near the front's actually like a grease gun of some kind. Not the American submachine gun grease gun, like an actual like mechanic grease gun. And this is not the kind of maintenance that you would be trying to do in the middle of combat. Like if this KV tank had been knocked out, it had taken that track hit during combat, the crew's probably not hopping out and immediately starting to try to work on the engine. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, this is the kind of situation where you would leave the tank and come back for it later if you could, or try to permanently disable it so it couldn't be captured by the enemy. Yeah, with all these tools scattered about, hatches open, I think it's far more likely that this KV tank had some kind of engine problem. It had pulled off to the side of the road here. The crew was working on repairing it, and while they were working on repairing it, the Germans spotted it and hit it with some kind of gun, probably a large artillery piece given the amount of damage here, though that's just speculation. And at this point, we don't see any bodies around the tank. If we did, I wouldn't be showing this photo on YouTube. It's possible those have already been removed. It's more likely that once that strike came in and hit the tank, the crew just bolted and abandoned it at that point. Now, we do see these two guys in the background that appear to be digging. I guess it's possible they could be burying the crew, but I really am struggling to definitively say that's a shovel that he's holding. They could be running wire or doing something completely unrelated to the tank that they're behind here. And some of the other kind of neat things in this photo. So this first guy here we can see posing with the tank. He has a rifle across his shoulder. And we go to these two guys that are toward the front of the tank. The one closest to the tank here has his tunic off. So, given the fact that KVs become somewhat rarer after Barbarossa, I'm going to assume this is probably the summer of 1941, shortly after Barbarossa's commenced. And as a result of that, it's summer, it's hot. Obviously, this guy's taken off his tunic, try to cool off a little bit. And you do actually see a lot of photos of German soldiers posing with knocked out tanks for obvious reasons. Tanks are cool, and enemy tanks are always going to be interesting to the soldiers that are fighting them. And you see a lot of these kind of like, I hesitate to call this a trophy photo, really, but you see a lot of these photos with guys posing with knocked out tanks, and KVs are always very popular because they're big, they're imposing. Same with the, I believe it's the T-28, like land ships that have like the 5 turrets. Those are also very popular photo opportunities when they happen to stumble upon those. And if you look at the top of the photo here, you can actually see part of a number. Now, I don't think this is an archival number because the back of this photo is marked Rusland, Russia. It looks like it's pretty standard out of some German soldiers, if not his album, out of his, box of photos from the war. It doesn't seem like it's really an archival photo. It doesn't have any of the other stamps I'd expect. Now, what I have heard is that, divisions tended to have official, propaganda war photographer types, press types, attached to them. Same as we'd have press correspondents in the American Army during the Second World War. And some of these guys, when they would be taking these pictures, and they'd be sending some of them back for, newspapers or newsreels or whatever back home, they would also offer the soldiers that they are serving with the opportunity to buy copies of these photos so they can have them for their own albums when they get back. So I'm assuming that this is a reference number from some photographer's catalog. Because what he would do is when he had his film developed, he put together like an album and he'd be showing the guys like, hey, like look at these photos you can order, and we could send them back to your home wherever that is. At least I believe that's how that works. Now, I'm not sure of all the actual like logistics of how it worked. I just know that this is a phenomenon that a few of the photo sellers I've talked to have mentioned. And yeah, it's easy to see why somebody would want a copy of this photo. I mean, I bought it, 80 years later, and it's clear that people that were actually in the war that had maybe encountered a KV tank at some point and didn't have a camera would definitely want a chance to have a photo of this tank so they could show their family back home, some of the things they were fighting on the Eastern Front. So yeah, really neat photo. If you guys like this, like I said, I have a bunch of other KV tank photos we can go through, and I have a ton of other knocked out tanks and things as well because I find them really interesting. But yeah, overall, I hope you guys all enjoyed the video. Please leave a comment down below. Love hearing from you. Thank you all for watching. Happy collecting, and I will see y'all again very soon.